Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Sudio. Sudio is revolutionizing the way people see headphones with a unique approach of blending their sleek Scandinavian designs with cutting-edge technology that matches the quality of even the highest-rated headphones on the market for a fraction of the cost. I will only accept sponsors on this show who have products or services that I personally use and believe in, and Sudio certainly meets those requirements. I have their on-the-ear model that they call the Regent. You know, these are those big leather bad boys that go over half your head, but I love them because they're super comfortable. They have Bluetooth capabilities, and most importantly, they have an amazing battery life of 24 plus hours of active use and 20 days of standby life. I can use them all week without having to recharge them, which I absolutely love. And the best part is that they're actually affordable. And as a listener of this show, you'll get an additional 15% off with discount code Millennial15. That's MILLENNIAL 15. So check them out at studiosweden.com. I really enjoy these headphones, and I think that you guys will as well. And you can find that link in the show notes. Hey y'all, I want to share some exciting news that on Saturday, December 2nd of this year, 2017, I will be hosting the first ever live Millennial Mastermind event, the Launchpad Mastermind Achieve Your Dreams in 2018. This event is designed to help you launch 2018 as the best year of your life. It will be an intimate group as we're only selling 25 tickets, and the venue is this amazing cabin-style meeting space that is set in the gorgeous Cuyahoga Valley National Park just outside of Cleveland. Tickets are on sale now, and I'd love to have you there. So to learn more, you can go to millennialmm.com/launchpad and check out more about the event. I hope to see you there. Hello, and welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Mulvey. If you're a millennial looking for actionable advice and a proven formula on how to build the life of your dreams, then this is the show for you. Each week, I'll be connecting with inspiring guests who will be sharing their wisdom on how to reach success. So if you're ready to take your life to the next level, buckle up and enjoy the ride. Have you ever had the thought, I should write a book? Many of us have thought it, but few have actually gone on to write it. Jacob Hollabaugh is one of those few. Not only did he write it, he managed to have it written, published, and available on Amazon in under 6 months. In this episode, Jacob shares his process and the tools that he used to turn his literary brainchild into reality. After listening to this episode, you will have the knowledge you need to write and publish your own book. And you'll probably also want to go on Amazon and check out his book, Our Downward Spiral, A Culture of Outrage Defines Us and Divides Us. So with that, please give it up for Jacob Hollabaugh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. Today, I'm joined by an old friend and a friend who's done some pretty inspiring things over the past year, Mr. Jacob Hollabaugh. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing great, Brad. Thanks for having me. It's quite the honor to be on the podcast and to see everything you've built. So super cool to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, no problem. And I'm really excited about this conversation because I think we were talking last winter, so really not long ago at all, just on the phone, and you were talking about kind of what you wanted to do. You're starting a blog, and you said you had this idea in the back of your head of maybe wanting to write a book, and you had read a book that inspired you to do so. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. And like next thing I know, you were like halfway done with writing a book. And that's what we get to talk about today. Now the book is out on Amazon, on shelves, and I'm just like blown away by how quickly the whole thing came together. So just to kind of take a step back, can you give us an idea, kind of, I guess, a little bit of your background, and then where the idea for this book came from, and why you decided to go ahead and self-publish a book?
Absolutely. Well, first, I do have to give you credit, because in that same conversation you just referenced, I had the gall to ask you if I actually wrote a book, would you have me on your podcast? And here you are having me on your podcast. So thank you for holding up your end of the bargain and keeping me have some motivation. I actually did think about that many times when I was having some writer's block, is that like I wanted to be on Mulvey's podcast and this is a way to do it. So thanks for the motivation.
Hey,
but
a Lannister always pays his debts.
I don't watch Game of Thrones, but I knew that was a Game of Thrones reference.
Perfect.
So
that's all you need to
keep
know.
Up with the culture. Yeah, you know.
Yeah. So my listeners know how nerdy I could be, but
I'm going to catch up by the last season. I've committed to it. So they need to give me like 2 years, hopefully. I know you don't want to hear that, but I need 2 years to catch up.
Yeah, you've got time.
Awesome. So a little background on me. Grew up in small town, 8,000 person town of Bryan, Ohio, land of the dumb sucker, and lived my whole life there before going to Miami University, where I met yourself and many other great people, and studied marketing and entrepreneurship, always knowing that I wanted to kind of do something on my own. The entrepreneurship was kind of the focus of my studies while I was there, although unfortunately we were the last class that was not allowed to major in it. Everyone after us was allowed to major, so I could only minor, but studied it a lot, loved it. Always wanted to know I wanted to kind of have my own business, do my own thing at some point in my life. And so post-grad, have bounced around a little bit, working in all kinds of organizations, from some of the biggest companies in the world, like a Nestle, down to startups that in their first few months, watching them grow, and companies in between, different industries, kind of trying to figure out where I really fit, what I wanted to do, and finding myself a little bit lost, as many people our age are coming to realize that right after college, it hits you really quick that you need to know what you want to do and go do it. And that question can be a big one to actually tackle. And so I found myself about a year ago. I had moved to Lexington, Kentucky. And when I got there, while I had an awesome job set up there, I decided I wanted to start working on something on the side, something that I could build myself into my own business in some manner, that whether I did it on the side forever as a passion thing, or whether it ultimately became what I did full time and, you know, paid my bills with, I wanted to have something that was mine and that I could always fall back on. And so I started thinking, and as I had been doing for about 4 years, I wasn't coming up with a lot of answers. I couldn't really figure out, with the broad question of what do you want to do, what that answer was. And so I narrowed it down and found a way to narrow it down by asking myself who the people I respected the most or looked up to the most in life were, and also like who I would want to be, whose career I would want, or who you would want to switch lives with. And outside of your NBA player and a few musicians that were a little, you know, out of reach because of the talents I was born with, all of the names on that list were authors and thinkers and podcasters. I've been an avid reader since I was about 5 years old. My library of books are my prized possessions in life. And so authors and writers were the people I realized I had the most respect for, the people that, if given the chance, I would love to, you know, meet and just have a conversation with. And I realized if that was the answer, then that must mean maybe that's what I should do. And so I had started this blog. I had spent a good year and a half kind of falling in love with politics and government and the media, which was a bit of a 180 from myself growing up through my high school and college years, where I ignored pretty much 100% of everything to do with all of that, but had fallen in love with it. And so when I decided to start a blog, I dedicated it to just that, politics and government, and kind of how media around those two things work, with the hope of providing a centrist view and somewhat of, in a very politically divided climate, someone that was willing to listen to both sides and try to put both sides into the same piece of paper or blog post and kind of give light to both sides, and so that people could read them in the same spot. And along the way, as you mentioned, I was given a book. And well, actually, I wasn't given the book. My wonderful girlfriend, Dorothy, was given a book by her father that's called You Must Write a Book. And while it wasn't meant exactly for someone like me, it was more meant actually for someone like yourself. That the premise of the book was basically your best business card in life is a book. If you write a book on the topic that you claim to be an expert on, it's the greatest way to build a client base, to prove to people you know what you're talking about. And so while it didn't exactly fit my situation, I realized that this blog was going to take years and years to gain any sort of following or gain any sort of real traction. And while the reps of writing over and over were going to be great, as I had never written before, I have a long ways to go in actual technical writing, I just fell in love with the idea of I should write a book. I should stop writing these blog posts, and the first thing I should do is put a book out. It had always been a lifelong dream of mine to see my name along my bookshelf next to many of my idols and role models in life, and I never thought I would do it this soon. I always thought that was more of a late in life, maybe retirement, would write some fun stories and this and that, but decided why not now, and decided just to go ahead and go for it. So I stopped doing the blog, I paused the blog. I'm now picked it back up, but put a notice up that, hey, over the next couple months, I'm going to write this book. It's going to be published this fall, and then I'll get back to the blog. But I want to start with one big statement. And being the avid reader that I am, when I first got to Kentucky, I knew zero people. And so my social life was rather limited, to say the least. And went from being an avid reader to that was about the only thing I would do every night when I would come home, and read books of all different genres, topics, but almost all nonfiction, trying to always learn about new areas of life, new things. And I noticed lots of the big cultural trends I was reading about in different areas all did kind of interconnect and played a big part in what is now our very politically divided climate that we're in. And I thought, no one else out here is kind of connecting the dots between all these different things. We all agree on some of these many different overarching principles and ideas, whether it's in tech and social media or within government itself, but we never intertwine them and talk about how it's all connected and kind of drives us in one specific way as a culture. And so I was like, I've got an idea and I've got a theory, and if now is not the best time, I don't know when will be. So decided I'm just going to sit down and do it. And also, the blog was always meant to, get the reps up there that learn how to write by doing it, a crash course essentially. But I decided blog posts are only 1,000 words or so. Books are much longer. That'll be a heck of a better experience. So just decided to go for it. And now, thankfully, about 6 months later, it's out and available for people to buy. So pretty crazy it's actually the first time I've said that out loud. It's only been out and available to buy for 2 hours now as I talk to you. So pretty crazy to say that out loud, but here we are.
That's awesome. And just the timeline in which that all went down is crazy, because, people talk about writing a book or doing these different things, whether it's writing a book or even just starting a blog or starting a business for years. And you just dove right into it. And I love something you said there. If now's not the best time, then I don't know when will be. And that's an awesome line, because it's inspiring to me to kind of hear you less than a year ago talking about wanting to do this, and without any hesitation at all, just see you dive into it. And now, it's out there and people can go ahead and buy this damn thing. It's sweet.
Yeah. I'm thrilled about it.
And then, so the other thing that I actually wanted to call attention to was that you said when you're trying to figure out what you wanted to do, and you'd kind of been banging your head against the wall on this question of like, what is your thing? What is that passion that you could throw yourself into? I'd never heard anybody take the approach you have of looking at who do you respect the most. I think that's a really unique way of going about solving that question, because a lot of us struggle with that. I know before I started this podcast, I was thinking for years about, what can I do? Like, what can I do outside of my job that I'm going to be passionate about, that is going to be of interest to me? And so I wanted to call attention to that point as well.
Yeah, I've been sharing that with quite a few people since I started writing the book. Or naturally, people, ask me what made me want to start, and I tell them that, and it's always awesome to see kind of the light in their eyes, and some people that when they hear that, they realize that they are already doing that, or if they aren't, you can kind of see the natural questioning start in their brain. But I truly am someone that for 4 years, I guess now, which is also weird to say, post-graduation, I guess during school, you always think, if I've got all this time to figure out what I want to do. But then once school's over, you realize that I guess I don't have all this time to figure out what I want to do because I got to start doing something. And for me personally, I ended up in a position where I believe now pretty wholeheartedly that I studied the wrong thing in marketing, that I don't have a ton of interest in sales or selling things to people necessarily. And so that put me even further back, that, a year or two into my career, as I had already changed jobs once, I realized that even the job I had switched to, I wasn't in love with, or definitely, didn't wake up in the morning passionate about. And almost every day for years, I would ask myself, what do I want to do? Like, what would make me happy? What would, get me excited every morning when I wake up to say, this is what I have to do today, and actually be pumped that I get to do that, or, get to try to obtain that in that day. And it really wasn't until I figured out that the easiest way around it is just asking yourself that question of, we all, when we're sitting around with our friends, talk about, who would you switch lives with for a day or whatever. And we all inevitably say some, Leonardo DiCaprio or some big actor or LeBron James or whatever that would be awesome, obviously. But some careers are a little less obtainable than others. But when you ask yourself the question of who do you respect, who would you want to switch lives with, whose career would you love to have, even those that are obtainable, say LeBron James. I'm a lifelong basketball fan, grew up always wanting to be in the NBA like many, many kids growing up do. And, that was never going to happen, but I could still look to him while I kind of crossed him off the list of not going to be an NBA player. I could still be LeBron James, the philanthropist, or LeBron James, the community builder, or other aspects of why I respect someone like him could still play a part in telling me what it is that I'm clearly looking at in other people and respecting and admiring and wanting. And so, if you make a list of, I've originally started with about 8 to 10 people that were just my all-time favorite people, that for one reason or other, they were ones I came back to either, check back in on their work, reread things, rewatch things, re-listen to things, or was always the one, I'm on their mailing list that any content they put out, I've got to have. And realize those people are the ones that if I could pick, my dream 3 people to have dinner with and just have a conversation and a beer with, it would be these people, then that clearly meant to me that I want to be one of those people. That makes the most sense. And so I found it just to be a great way to narrow it down and give a more direct path and a more specific path to finding that answer than just the vague question of, what do I want to do? Because that's so hard for people to answer because it is so broad, because, you can do anything. There's tens of thousands of millions of different things and paths you can take, that when asking yourself that broad question, you're never going to narrow it down without a little bit of luck. And so trying to find a way to make it more specific and find yourself examples to point yourself towards and say, that's what I want. Then you can dive into how did they get there? Where did they start? While we only know them now because they're likely pretty famous people, they obviously didn't start there. So you can then research them, find out where they started, how they got started, and go from there and have a little bit more of a blueprint for yourself and give yourself some more specificity to what you want to do.
I love it. I freaking love it. And anybody who's listening to this, I hope that you can take that and implement that right away. That's a very actionable thing that you can go ahead and just start writing down some names and work through some of those exercises that Jacob just walked us through.
And don't cross the musicians or the athletes off first thing, especially the musicians. You can come back to those later in life, but they're not right. I wasn't born with the singing voice to, go out on a stage, but I'm still going to do it at some point in life. Just going to follow the other paths first.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And like you said, you can take bits and pieces from those people's journey and plug those in. It doesn't have to be, a carbon copy of something that one of your heroes did. You can take pieces from every one of them and create your own path based on some of those little individual footprints. So
absolutely.
So you're writing this blog, you have the idea that you want to write this book. You get off the phone with me. I tell you, you've got a spot on the podcast as soon as it's written. Where do you go from there? How do you even go about starting this process? Because I know that's really the point where, okay, you made the decision, but it looks like you have a mountain to climb ahead. How do you start climbing that mountain?
So the first thing I did was I basically wrote out what all the steps of writing a book would be. And I didn't put a timeline on it in the beginning. I just wanted to write out all the steps. And then I took the first step and I gave myself a timeline for, I just want to take the first step and see how it feels. And after that, hopefully that builds the confidence that I can assess how it went. And then at that point, I can assign a timeline to every step the rest of the way, and then I'll follow it. And so the first step for me was I'd kind of already done a little bit of it just in the amount of reading that I had done in general and already had the idea in my head. So a lot of the research that went into the book was done without ever having thought that it was ever going to be put into a book. But I decided the first step was just to write the outline of the idea and then to read as many books on the topics that fell into that outline as possible. And I gave myself 2 weeks and said, at the end of 2 weeks, you need a detailed outline of the book and you need to have a lot of the research done and notated and ready to go. And at the end of those 2 weeks, you can see, did you do it, A, and B, if you did it, do you feel comfortable? Do you feel like you're on a path, like you're going to be into it the whole time? You're going to have the passion level needed to go through it. And I thankfully did. After 2 weeks, I had put down like 9 or 10 books, I think, in 2 weeks and notated them all and wrote out this outline and got myself really pumped up seeing it on a couple pieces of paper that there is something here. I wasn't crazy. Like this does make sense to me. And so then the most important thing that I did was put a deadline on it and told people about it, those two things. And the deadline was really nice for me because I kind of had a built-in one that made me go through the process a little quicker than maybe I would have anticipated otherwise doing, in that I started actually writing the book on May 1st of this year, and I was leaving for a 10-day vacation in Maine on July 1st. And so I had a 2-month window where I said, I want the first draft of this book to be written the day I leave for Maine so that I can relax and reflect on it in Maine and then read it and go back and start the second edit, and that would be the perfect place to do the second edit of. And it was kind of just a bit of a dreamy, whimsical like place that a writer would go and write. And so I set that deadline and wrote out, here's the schedule that has to be followed if I'm going to meet it. And then to make sure that I met it, and I think truly one of the most important things anyone can do when putting themselves a goal out there for themselves, is I told people about it. I told many friends around me that, hey, I'm going to do this. And I asked a few different specific people, like, I'm not only going to do this, I need you to ask me about it occasionally. If we talk, please ask me how it's going. And got a group of 6 to 7 people that I really trusted, that I'm very close with, that I knew that whenever I talked to them, they would ask me about it, and that I would be a bit embarrassed if I didn't have anything to tell them, any progress to share with them, or if at any point I would have to tell them I kind of decided to put that to the side for now or give up on that. And peer pressure, I think, is one of the greatest motivators out there. For anyone that struggles with motivation, telling people about your goals is one way to make sure that you follow through on them and happen. If your friends never know about them, it's just in your head. It's easy to give up on it very quickly when things get tough. But if you've got people that now expect you to actually do something, then it goes a long way. So that was exactly, even what I was thinking when I originally asked you, can I be on the show if I write a book, was another way for me to add a little motivation to the pot of, Brad's going to ask me if I did this. He's going to, if next time I talk to him, he's going to see how it's going, make sure, if I'm writing it, he's going to have me on. So he's going to have to ask me. And that made things so much easier, knowing that while I was super passionate and every day was able to wake up wanting to write the next part, wanting to do the next step, it was also great to then know, almost daily I was going to talk to one of those people that was going to mention, hey, how's that book coming along? Are you still trying to write that book? And being able to tell them, yeah, I'm actually, I finished the second chapter the other day. It's with the editor now. Like, I'm on my way. That also gives you not only someone to be accountable to, but also little bits of joy throughout the process that you feel accomplished when you get to update them and let them know, like, yeah, I've already written 2 or 3 chapters, like, I'm doing it. I'm really doing it. And kind of solidify it in your mind that you are capable. Like, you've already done part of it. That's awesome. You're telling people you've done part of it, and bring kind of joy to the process of the whole thing. Because the process and the journey, while extremely fun and extremely, kind of the most beneficial and best part of any journey, isn't usually the end result, but the journey that got you there. It does get to be a slog a bit of time, and it is extremely, wearing on you and difficult. And so building in those little moments of happiness and joy that, being able to tell people that you are doing it, what you've accomplished so far, is a must in my mind, and definitely was a must for me in getting through writing the whole thing.
That's a great strategy. And so you're talking about kind of the process then to get there, and you have those little wins that keep you going. But what was your strategy in terms of, that 2-month sprint of writing that first draft? Were you working like within a specific routine? Did you have mini deadlines that you were trying to reach? I'm just curious what your process was there, because writing a first draft of a book in just 2 months sounds pretty incredible. I haven't done it, but it sounds like something that would take me about 6 months to a year. So I would love to hear your process.
Well, I will go ahead and say it's not the longest book in the world by any means. So not anything crazy where 1,000-page document coming out here, anything like that. But
I've got it in front of me right now, and it's definitely impressive. Yeah. We broke the 200-page mark, so don't sell it short.
Yeah. So I did then. I had basically that 2-month window, 60 days, but I then made the timeline for writing it in a 50-day timeline, knowing that inevitably I was doing this outside of my actual job. And so I knew inevitably there would be maybe a day or two here or there, something would come up, things would happen that even no matter how much I wanted to, I might not get to do what I needed to do day to day. And so I wanted that kind of 10-day buffer built in. So I made a 50-day plan where the outline of the book was to be 10 chapters long. And so I said 10 chapters, that's 5 days a chapter. And I did adjust that a little bit for a couple of the chapters are much meatier and denser than a few of the others. So I adjusted and had a few were on more of a 7-day schedule versus 3 or 4-day schedule. But everyone followed the same pattern of day 1 was a detailed outline of the entire chapter. Day 2 was then going back to all those books I've read, pulling the notations and all the quotes from it that related to that chapter, putting them into the outline, doing some additional research on the topics of that chapter, adding notes. So sourcing and notating everything on day 2 to where I had a very detailed notated outline in front of me. Day 3 and 4 were when I just wrote contemporaneously, basically the first draft of it. I'm not a writer by trade. I hope to be able to actually confidently call myself one day. Publishing one book does not make you a writer. I can guarantee you that. I've got a long way to go, but I
disagree with you on that point, but continue.
Yeah, but I told myself I basically said I would say what I wanted to write out loud, and I tried to type as fast as I would talk. Sometimes I even did actually just record myself talking out loud and then would go back and type that out. But I just wanted to get a first draft on the table in days 3 and 4, and then day 5, I would go back and rewrite and clean it up, do my own bit of editing. And by the end of day 5, it was to be sent to my editor. And that way I would wake up the next day and start day 1 all over again with the next chapter and outline. Day 2 source, day 3 and 4 write it, day 5 edit it and send it off to the editor. And just did that on repetition again with small change. A couple of the chapters I added a day or two to, and a couple of them that were much shorter I took a day off, but got it to where I knew that on June 31st, basically the day before I left for the vacation, that I would have the first draft done and all in my editor's hands. And she had, her own deadline of having it back to me by the 3rd day of my vacation, so I could start on the process of rewrites and looking over it. But having that drilled in, it's a routine. I know what I'm doing every day. Both help just because I'm a big believer in habits and routine, but also because it broke it down into many small chunks where writing a book was super duper daunting when I just thought of, I've never written a book. I've never written anything all that long besides, maybe a 4 or 5 page paper in college or high school or something. But then when I broke it down and just said, all right, in 5 days, I have to write a chapter, which might be 5 pages, might be 15 pages. But, I have written a 5-page, 10-page report in college in a day sometimes, or 2 days or whatever. So I've done this before. I've turned it into something that I had done and my brain could wrap its mind around. This is fully doable. You've done it before. You can easily do it again. And got myself in the mindset where it was no longer you're writing a book. It turned into you're writing a chapter in the next 5 days. And the chapters do a little bit stand alone as kind of their own thoughts that intertwine together. So it was almost like writing 10 mini books that were all a part of a series in a way, but just built in that 5-day process and then just went through it over and over. I had a chart when I started. I use Trello. There's many wonderful apps and different things out there you can use now to plan out your days and your tasks and whatnot, but had it planned out from day one through 50. Here's what needed to be done. And my goal was to never fall more than 1 day behind. And if I fell behind at all, it better have a very good reason for it. Like no emergencies or anything like that came up during it, but it would have needed to be like, if you end up in the hospital or something like that, you can take the day off. But otherwise, no matter how long you're at your day-to-day job, no matter how long you got other stuff going on, like at the end of the day, you need to have these tasks accomplished to get to the next day to be able to start fresh and have a chance at completing those tasks and just taking it 1 day at a time.
Well, the discipline that you were able to implement there is incredible. But it's also reassuring that, this is doable. This is a repeatable process that people who are listening to this, and I hear you talking about this, and it gets my wheels turning of, wow, I haven't really thought about writing a book, but it's not something that's out of the realm of possibility, implementing Jacob's strategies here.
Yeah, not at all. It's again, I had never written anything other than a few blog posts at that point and, papers in college and papers for work, reports for work and anything, but no actual experience writing. And so it's definitely doable for anyone. Absolutely.
While you were writing this, you also had to go out, find an editor, do the whole self-publishing thing. And that was clearly new as well. So were there any resources that you found that were helpful along that front? Or where did you start when you had to, teach yourself this whole other area alongside writing the book of how to publish a book?
Yeah, so, and that is one area where I did not end up sticking to the exact schedule because of what a novice I was going in and how much I had to learn. So the book was originally going to come out the first or second week of August. And so, a little month later, but still out. So the first thing was I do have to give a shout out and all credit to Henri Cordaire and her book, You Must Write a Book, because it does lay out the steps and how to self-publish very, very well in it. And anyone out there who would want to write a book, I'd highly recommend picking it up and giving it a read because it lays out the steps super well for you. And from there, I kind of just had a baseline of here's some different ways you can do things. Here are just the different steps you're going to have to go through. And thankfully, we now have the wonderful Jeff Bezos and Amazon that makes everything in life easier for us. And that is where my book is published. It's exclusively on Amazon because they have come a long way in making it easy for anyone who wants to publish a book to be able to. They print on demand. I'm in their beta program for their paperback printing. Hopefully they will have hardcover up and running sometime in the next year or so that I could put this book out in hardcover too. But I knew from the beginning that I was always going to just have it on Amazon only because that took the biggest hurdle out of the way of finding someone who would print the book, and also took the biggest one of the biggest financial hurdles out of the way of if you go through a traditional publisher or even if you self-publish yourself with a traditional printer, you do have to buy copies of the book up front and put your own money up and hope that you actually sell all of the copies you pay to have printed. So that was a big help. But then as far as all of the things that came between, the editors, the designers, the formatters, it was a combination of, one, just working within my network. I was fortunate enough to be put in touch through my network with a great, unbelievable designer that produced a cover that I am still blown away by every time I look at it, and am just so unbelievably appreciative to have and be able to call my own. And so, leveraging your network, you never know who's going to be able to lead you to the people that you need. But then I also did use a bunch on Fiverr and some other services like it that have freelance artists available for things like editing, proofreading, formatting, and all other kinds of things outside of just getting your own book out there. It's very easy with the technology we've been given today to find the people that you need to help you accomplish what you need to accomplish. You just got to go out there and look for them. And so, basically the one book that I read that gave me the platform of, here are the steps you need, here are all the people you need to think about that you're going to have to hire, because it is a lot more than I really realized going in, but leveraged my network and leveraged the technology we have available to connect with some people that were willing to help me out on a budget that made it doable for me.
That's incredible. And when you talk through it, it makes it sound, much more achievable than one might think, without having any background in that space. So we haven't talked too much about the actual book, and I definitely want to make sure that listeners get a chance to hear a bit about it, because I've had the opportunity to read it now, and to being totally transparent, I'm not somebody who is super involved in politics, but I took a lot out of this book, and I don't think that by any means you have to be a huge player in the political landscape today, but there's so much that, I think this should be a book that everybody reads who is of voting age, because it just really sheds some light on kind of some of these trends that are going on in today's culture around this area. So would you mind sharing a little bit about the book, Our Downward Spiral, and maybe what the biggest takeaway or two, especially for millennials, are that they can expect to get from reading it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called Our Downward Spiral, How a Culture of Outrage Defines and Divides Us. And I'm glad you said what you just said about yourself reading it, because it really is meant for people that are very much not involved in news or politics, or don't pay all that much attention to it. Because as I alluded to earlier, I myself was one of those people that 2 years ago, I couldn't have told you a single thing about major storylines going on day to day, or who's doing what, and anything about politics or government. And I've come a long way since then and have really dove into it. But this book was written for all of those people, because that is the majority of the country. The people that actually care about the inner workings of politics and that watch the news every day is a pretty small, slim group, and is a very minority amount of the group that actually votes on and puts the people into office that we have. And so this book was written in hopes, partially as somewhat of a self journey of my own, of saying, I'm an outsider and I'm young and I don't know anything about this. I want to learn about it, and I want others to learn about it at a high level, that even when they're not paying attention to it, how it impacts them. So the basis of the book is that there is this downward spiral that is taking place that all starts with the culture of outrage that our generation, especially, not by itself, but especially our generation, has helped to bring about, and that we demand entertainment in everything we want. We think of things in a best worst mentality. We're only attracted to things that of outrage, things that polarize us. We don't talk about things that are average, even if they are, we play them up. We have things like our social media that no one else has ever had. We now live a digital life where nothing can be mundane. Our friends don't want to know about our dinner that took place, just went out and had a drink with Brad. That's, boring. We have to spice it up. We have to take the perfect picture, have this inspiring caption, and try to put out there this big fancy life that may be actually real, may not be. But we live in this culture where outrage is kind of king. It's what drives everything. And it's what drives all the things we then complain about. So from there, we move to the media, and all of our complaints about the media come back to ourselves. The media responds to its viewers. They give out what we want, what we click on, what we watch, what we listen to. That's what they keep putting out. It's a business. it's easy to see once you actually look at their business model. And so we go from how that outrage influences the media to how those two things influence the politicians that we get, and how that ultimately influences the rules and laws we live by, the political climate that we have. And then furthermore, the biggest part, especially for our generation, the millennials, is that how then that whole spiral intensifies and grows stronger because of the isolated lives that we now live through our social media, through the fact that many of us are working remote, where that used to not be an option. We're working in smaller companies. We don't have to leave our home to have things delivered to us like food and, normal goods. I just talked up Amazon, but they play a big part in one chapter of my book that they now deliver everything in my city, at least in 1 hour for free, and how that's a little bit detrimental to our collective culture and society. And so it outlines all of these different cultural trends that all add up to give us the current environment we have, where one side looks at the other with hate and disgust and no understanding, and the other side does the same thing right back, and every day it widens and widens, and no one wants to talk to each other. No one wants to actually hear the other side out and listen to their ideas and either strengthen their own or come to some sort of compromise. Instead, we just yell across this ever-widening divide, willingly allowing ourselves to be this divided, two-sided binary country that we've never really been before, and we aren't actually when we really lay it out. Because like you said, most of the people that in this country don't pay that much attention to it and wouldn't even really fall that strongly on one side or the other, but the ones with the loud voices are kind of driving the train. So it lays all of that out, lays out the whole downward spiral, and then at the end gives some action items and ways that easy, very actionable things that anyone can do, whether you read the news 3 hours every single day when you wake up, or whether you might check in once a week, or maybe you just get the skim in the morning or something like that. Actionable items that everyone can do to make our politics and our government an area that's free of the outrage and thirst for entertainment that is totally fine when it comes to our movies, our Game of Thrones, like you mentioned earlier, all these other things. It's fine if you always just want to talk about that was the best, that was the worst, this is trash, this is amazing, whatever, but that stuff needs to stay out of our politics and government, because that is what runs our lives, what makes the rules and laws we live by. And so there's some action items at the end of a way to use outrage in its proper form and to kind of make small incremental changes in our lives that can have a great impact down the road if all of us are implementing them little by little.
Yeah, that's the part I love, is that you really break it down into some bite-sized steps that anybody can easily implement in their lives to really combat this divide that you mentioned. And so it's just a super interesting read, a very cool perspective on how we can start making those changes in our lives that ultimately roll up to having a much more macro effect on kind of the craziness we've seen in our country over the past year or several years. So for anybody who wants to check out the book, wants to pick it up on Amazon, or just wants to check out you, learn more about you, where are some spots that they can check all this stuff out?
So the book is live on Amazon.com right now. Just search Our Downward Spiral. It's the only thing that'll pop up. Purchase paperback version or the Kindle or e-reader version on there. And then if they want to follow along with the rest of my writing, they can check out my blog, centerobserver.com. And Twitter handle, same things, at Center Observer or at Jacob Hollabaugh for my personal one, that I will eventually start to actually use to talk about more than just my life. Like I barely ever tweet at this point, but I will use that as more of a little bit of a platform for my writing and thoughts moving forward. So those are the places that I can be found.
I love it, Jacob, and a huge shout out to you for, setting this goal of writing a book and actually making it happen. Nothing inspires me more than when people actually take action on the things that they say they want to accomplish. And the fact that you were able to accomplish this goal in such a short amount of time and kick off your journey is really cool and inspiring for me to see. So I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me. I definitely have to say, as a listener, I also appreciate the value you and all of your other many esteemed guests have brought to myself and all the other listeners out there. It's awesome. So thank you for that. And if I may, I do just want to add one more point as a way to kind of draw one point in the book in with something we mentioned earlier, and that can be a good takeaway for anyone out there listening, whether you're trying to write a book, do any project. And that was one of the books I read talked about our generation growing up with all these wonderful technologies, that many shortcuts have been built in for us already, and we don't realize that compared to our parents, our grandparents, any goal we set, we've already had the first 100 steps done for us and taken out of the way. And so when you're actually doing something, that means we have to be willing to put some of that time back in, recognize all that time we've been given. While it's hard to do, you have to recognize that has been given to us and use that to not cut any more corners, not try to shave off time here or there, maybe not put all the effort you need to in this little part or that little part. Because in the political side, it was more about, we have the internet now. We have Google, and that is an incredible thing. If we want to fact check something, if we want to know something, we can check it so quick and so easily. And we have the gift of finding out information instantly. I can log on online and go to any of my newspapers instantly, know knowledge as it's happening. We know news as it's breaking, and that's awesome. But then it's on us to put in the time to actually check stuff, to actually research stuff, and learn if it's true, if it's right, if what the other side is. We have to put that time in. And I think that translated a lot to what I was doing, that there was many times I could have taken a shortcut or tried to do this or that, or maybe, paid a little less for this editor or done this or that, where I could have added my own shortcuts, where I had to remind myself we are fortunate enough to grow up with inherent shortcuts that we just don't realize by the technology we've been given and the resources we have. So there's no need to add any more in. You have to, if anything, be willing to put more time than you think into something, because we've been given more time than we can ever realize.
That is an awesome closing thought. And I heard a rumor on the streets, and you don't have to commit to it right this second, but that you will be actually attending the Launchpad Mastermind here in December of this year. So if that's true, listeners who want to join us at that event can meet you in the flesh at here in Cleveland come December.
That is the plan. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great time.
I love it. All right, Jacob. Well, thanks for stopping by today, and super excited to see where this author path takes you and all the amazing things that are ahead of you in your journey.
Thanks so much, Brad. Truly been an honor, man.